episode 2 of Alone Frozen, we got to see Michelle, Greg, and Woniya all start their journeys. Got about 6 days in. Seemed like they were all struggling right out of the gates. So expect early tap outs. It looked like in the preview that they had a boat coming to pick somebody up, so at least one tap out should happen next episode, and all 3 of our contestants were at least thinking about tapping out in the first 6 days. You know, we might have kind of trash talked Mark last week, but there could be other competitors not very far behind him. All right, we'll run through our 3 contestants, starting with Woniya, aka Buckskin Revolution. Go check out her YouTube channel. She starts off on a pretty good note, finding a water bottle on the beach. Like, it didn't even look that dirty. Like, looked like somebody like just dropped it off. Like maybe when the helicopter landed, the pilot just threw it out the window to her. Basically looked like a brand new Gatorade bottle, and that could be a pretty nice asset for her. You know, a little extra storage for some water can make a big difference instead of having to go and gather water every time you want to use it, especially when I think most of our competitors are just cruising around with a singular pot. So they only have that pot to both cook and gather water, boil water, and especially with the water sources being salt water, you know, you can't just drink salt water. So it's going to be a little interesting to see if that can be a factor for her long term. I really liked that she slept on part of her tarp, that the whole, like, since everything was so wet, I thought that was really smart to fold that little bit of tarp underneath her sleeping bag to potentially just keep things a little bit drier. She does start building her permanent shelter, and it looks like she has decided to build against a rock face, which especially in this scenario I think is a good idea. Really cuts down the amount of time she's going to have to spend building that shelter, and also that those rocks can potentially hold a little bit of heat for her, and you know, she can run her fire right against the rock face without really much concern about it catching fire or her shelter catching fire, and I think that will work out well for her. Negatives from here on out, she thinks that she might have a little bit of tendonitis in her hand, which could hinder her ability to do pretty much anything out there, especially in cold, wet conditions. And also she is missing home, which could be a factor in how long she's able to stay out there. You know, there are 3 competitors here, are only 6 days in. Callie and Amos, we've only seen them for 5 days. So like we're just at the start of this thing. We're only like 10% through, and already starting to think about tapping out is not a good sign. All right, let's jump over to Greg. And Greg, he is almost comically Canadian. There's I forget what his line was when he first started. It was something boys, and like, just that's just very Canadian in my opinion. We also heard him drop a couple A's in there, and I'm always here to root for the Canadian content on Alone. One of the few reality shows that I watch that actually gets to have Canadian contestants on it, and I really appreciate that. So he kind of sets up a temporary shelter, and then immediately after sees bear tracks, and like, I don't know how far that was away from his shelter, but that has to be a little concerning for that first night out in Labrador. You know, we also know that they got dropped off later in the day, so that first day was a little bit of panic. I almost wonder if our first 3 competitors started a little earlier than the last three, because it's really, I didn't get the vibe in the first episode that they were dropped off that late in the day. You know, those three must have got dropped off, and then some weather happened, preventing the other three from going out right away. We saw Greg get some mussels on the beach and then tried to use them as bait in fishing, which was a complete failure. From that, he loses his pot. I was having flashbacks of Sean losing his ferro rod. You know, Greg was starting to look like he was going to go and start panicking a little bit, but thankfully he did find his pot. But you know, things didn't really get better for Greg from there. Goes back to his shelter. His canvas tarp is leaking. He has to pull out the tarp that he's supposed to use to protect the camera gear and start using that as his shelter. He's got a soaked sleeping bag, manages to get it mostly dry, tries to trap some seagulls, but ends up just having the tide wash his tarp out. You know, things are already becoming miserable for Greg, and he's almost having PTSD of his time in Patagonia. You know, he's talking about having anxiety attacks. And you know, doesn't look great for him this early. I think that he really needs to just get one win and he will be good to go. One thing I really like about Greg, and same with Woniya, is that they feel like this is their life. Like survival, bushcraft, all of it, it's their life. It's their lifestyle, it's their personality, all of it. And you know, we don't get that from all the other competitors, and I really like seeing that on this show, because you know, those are the people that I find a little more interesting. Like Greg making his ridiculous trap, Woniya throwing that shelter up in no time. Like, I love watching them work, seeing what they're going to come up with, seeing what ideas they have, and just how they can adapt to any situation. Lastly, let's jump over to Michelle. So she lands on a beach with some clams and mussel, which seems like a pretty good resource for her. And pretty much within 5 minutes of getting to Labrador, she gets more food than her 21 days on her previous season. So that's pretty promising for Michelle. Just having any sort of food resource, whether big or small, can extend your time out there. You saw her go out and gather. Oh, I think she used her gaiters. Maybe I misread there. Kind of sewed the bottom and basically used it as a bag, which she just filled with anything edible from the beach. And not too bad for Michelle. We heard her say that she was going to build a small shelter, starts throwing up the frame of the shelter, and it immediately starts to look like a pretty large shelter. I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, this time I'm going to just have a small shelter, just what I need, and then it just looks like she's just making like a pretty big size shelter. The moment where she thought she saw a bear, but turns out it was just the ocean, was pretty good. You know, we got baited pretty hard with that cliffhanger going to commercial break, only to find out that it was the ocean. You know, we end the episode with her not really feeling well. We didn't really get a conclusion on that either, so we'll have to see next episode how she fares with how she's feeling. And looked like her tarp was already starting to get holes in it, and with the amount of rain we saw this episode, that is not going to be a good thing. Also, I don't remember who, but I think somebody built their roof very flat, and it looked like it was basically just filled with water. I don't remember who that, maybe that was in the preview, but whatever. Let's get out of here. Wrap things up for this episode. As always, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I'm out.